All right, we're live. And we're back. Back with my favorite duo, Adam Israel and Dan D. Federici on the Saratoga Podcast. You guys, it's been a while since this threesome has been together, and I have to say I have missed you both tremendously.
Well, thanks, Robin. Yeah, we've this feels good to get the three of us together. And City Council didn't disappoint. It's not like we don't have anything to talk about.
The City Council never disappoints if you're looking for chaos, madness, and just kind of general dysfunction and insanity, I would say. And it certainly didn't disappoint last night, did it?
No, it didn't. It was billed as a must-see, bring popcorn, and at least part of it was exactly that.
Adam, go ahead. Sorry, you wanted to say something.
I was going to say Dan and I actually made it over there for some of the city council meeting, and it was interesting. It kind of harkens back to Robin a few year days back at the city council when there was a lot of yelling and screaming and finger pointing, and it was something else. But we'll talk about it on the show.
Yeah, I'm gonna say one thing, which is that while we had a lot of public comment of yelling at us and yelling at Meg Kelly and myself specifically, there were a couple of key differences. One is that we never yelled at each other that way, ever. We never called each other names and screamed at each other the way this council screams at each other. I mean, that just never happened. And I will also say, as much as Meg Kelly and I didn't get along, she never would have allowed people to scream at me the way Commissioner Montagnino was yelled at last night. And although, there was part of me that sickly enjoyed it because I don't like Commissioner Montagnino, as you both well know, there was another part of me that was listening to him being called, and this is a quote, and we have some of these videos, and we'll try to use them judiciously because there's a lot of profanity in them. But when he was being called, effing fascist, again and again, I mean, the profanity that was being used, and I'm guilty of using the F-bomb on the show, I know that, but the profanity that was being used last night was really unacceptable, and Meg would not have allowed that to happen with me. She just wouldn't have. And
well, let's talk about what led up to this. I think
yes,
and it was at the city council meeting 2 weeks ago. The last city council meeting. There was Chandler Hickenbottom, I believe is the young lady's name, would not relinquish the mic. She kept speaking over her time. The city council adjourned a couple times, and eventually they had to call the meeting. Commissioner Montagnino, as we talked about in our last show, essentially signed, and Dan, you're the attorney and the former police officer, so I'm going to correct me if I'm wrong, but signed a not a warrant, but what did he sign? Essentially,
he would have signed the complaint or the information, and the judge would have signed the criminal summons, which is very similar to a ticket.
Right, but it's something that has to be addressed. So it's
not a custodial arrest. It's not a custodial arrest, but you got to show up.
You got to show up. It's $150. So it is something, right? It's definitely not nothing. And it's also not handcuffs, but it is something. And the other 4 council members came out pretty strongly against Commissioner Montagnino in pursuing this action. He went ahead with it anyway. And yesterday, the city council meeting, a lot of the BLM members showed up to adamantly share their dislike in Commissioner Montagnino and what he did.
Adam,
and so. Yeah.
Can I touch one thing in there?
Yeah.
The irony of ironies of all of this was that the day that Chandler was in court happened to also be yesterday. So she had to show up to respond to this summons yesterday in court. So at 11 a.m. yesterday morning, she showed up to Saratoga City's city court. The 2 Saratoga Springs judges recused themselves, which I thought was kind of interesting. So they had to bring in a judge from Mechanicville to adjudicate over this summons. She entered a plea of not guilty, but we learned at the same time that Commissioner Montagnino also filed an order of protection against Chandler Hickenbottom, presumably not because he was worried about his safety in the way that you and I would hear about orders of protections that are typically in domestic situations, but it appears that he was doing that such that he could keep her out of city council meetings. When that was brought up in court yesterday, the judge basically kind of almost scoffed at it and immediately turned it down. And there was some kind of giggling in the courtroom.
Hold on, because the restraining order wasn't that she could not go to city council meeting.
But I think that was the.
She couldn't act unlawful. She couldn't go to a city council meeting and continue to act unlawful, and that would kind of up the ante of any charges or, I guess for lack of a better term, trouble that she would be into. So I think that's an important distinction, that it wasn't barring her from. No point would that have barred her from the city council meeting. It just would have increased the penalties if she were to commit any crimes or misdemeanors or.
It would have created a separate second charge of criminal contempt if she would, and I think it was pretty wide open. Any illegal activity, not just at City Hall. At least that's what I understand, but I don't have full information, so I could be wrong.
But it did it doesn't matter anyway, because the judge said
a hard no. I have to bring it up specifically though, from just like an optics perspective. I think, and we can get into this later, but I think have been so many moments where Jim Montanino has really like put his foot in his mouth, and this order of protection or whatever you want to call it, the optics of it were just like terrible. And I think legally, I think most people would have advised him that it wasn't going to be able to move forward either way in court. And so I think it was just, I think that was a mistake on his end, but I think there have been a lot of mistakes here. So anyway, Adam, I didn't mean to interrupt you in terms of the timeline. I just thought the irony of the council meeting and the summons happening on the same day in terms of the court appearance was just kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, that was perfect because my timeline was over. I had come to the end of it. So I guess that leads to questions of Robin. We know how you think about the Jim with the order of protection or the restraining order. Dan, your thoughts? Or Robin, do you want to extrapolate on your thoughts? Go ahead.
Well, so the thing about the summons is the one thing I want to talk about. So at no point when I was on the city council did I ever issue a summons against anyone. Nor did I ever issue an order for someone to be arrested ever on my time on the city council, because, and this is something that I actually want to ask Commissioner Benton about when he comes on. We have Lou Benton coming up, who was a former commissioner of public safety, because my understanding of the role of the commissioner of public safety is not to order the police chief to make arrests or to issue summons, because I am not an expert in when a crime is committed or when a summons should be issued. That to me is for the police department to decide, or for the prosecutor's office to decide. That's not for the commissioner of public safety to decide. So that wasn't something I ever did in my position as commissioner of public safety. I personally, and it's so much easier, by the way, to be sitting on the sidelines and say what, shoulda, woulda, coulda happened. I personally was at the February 7th meeting when Chandler kind of filibustered public comment and was trying to express her frustration over the lack of police reform. I personally think the right move in that instance would have been to clear the music hall, to clear the room, and to continue with the meeting. And so then you're not singling anyone out, but it wasn't just Chandler that had kind of taken over. It was really the entire crowd had kind of devolved, because people started shouting at Chandler. Then BLM started shouting back at the group of people who were shouting at Chandler. So there was chaos kind of happening all over. And I just think the room should have been cleared in its entirety. Because when you issue a summons against Chandler specifically, we've seen this before. It just fuels the fire. And it creates things like what we saw last night, which was basically like merch tables of T-shirts that said, Jim Montanino, your racism is showing, that were being sold for $25 to fund Chandler Hickenbottom's legal fees. We saw a courthouse at 11 a.m. that was packed with literally every single media outlet possible was there. And so again, these things, sometimes I look at them and I think, like, is this the most productive way to address the core problem here? And I don't think what Jim did ultimately was productive, especially knowing that the other 4 council members were not going to be in unison with him and stand behind him in making that decision, which ultimately last night really, again, was his downfall, because he didn't have the support of the people at the table, even when he was being berated and harassed in public comment in a way that I found to be unacceptable.
Yeah, even more so. It looks like this, Commissioner Montanino and Mayor Kim were kind of the fearsome duo of that city council. And this certainly seems to have driven a wedge there between their relationship.
They were trading barbs last night. It got a little ugly in the second half of that meeting. And it was bizarre, right? Like, wait a minute, Kim and Montanino aren't getting along? Then Dylan Moran was nodding everything the mayor said. He's saying, I agree. How often do you hear that? Those two are at odds. But you're seeing different alignments, different allies, different enemies now, or maybe enemies too strong of a word, but they were not friends last night. That much I can say.
So
yeah, it's going to make for an interesting campaign season, right, Robin? I mean, remember last year? I mean, they were the five of them. I mean, Dominique, who was the candidate for Public Works, she was kind of on the outskirts, but for the most part, the Democrats were a solid unit, and they had to be because they had a full slate of Republican candidates, which they might not this year. But it's going to be interesting to see the Democratic events and fundraising events and so forth. And how, are they still a team showing up to these? Are they all going to hold their own events? What's it going to look like? At the end of the day, it's not. Go ahead, Robin.
No, I don't mean to be like laughing so much, but you can't make this shit up. I'm sorry. It is like loony. Politics here is Looney Tunes, you guys. And one of the reasons I'm like cracking up while Adam's talking is because I know, a little bit of the inner workings of what's happening with the Democratic slate of candidates. And one of the things that's happened is that Ron Kim has refused to be on the same petition as the other 4 Democratic candidates. So the first step of getting on the ballot as a candidate is that you have to circulate a petition and get enough signatures to get on the ballot. And usually the Democratic endorsed slate of candidates would all be on the same sheet. So you would come to someone's door and you'd say, hi, I want to get these Democrats on the ballot. Would you be willing to sign? And it would have all 5 candidates listed and you get someone's signature. Well, Ron Kim has refused to be on the same sheet as Dylan Moran. So he's on a separate sheet now. And then allegedly, Jim Montanino was attempting to solicit someone to run against Dylan Moran. So that is why last night you saw Dylan Moran applauding people who were going against Jim Montanino. So that should give you a little insight into some of the infighting.
Yeah, him and Commissioner Kim. All that, would it shock you if Jim Montanino was primaried?
It will. We would actually know at this. We would presumably know at this point if he was being primaried, and unfortunately, he's not being primaried by a Democrat at this point.
There's still time, though, right? You can still get petitions out. Look at what's happened in the past week, and someone could be fired up and say, "I'm going to get petitions out."
So if you're a Democrat out there who has interest in being public safety commissioner, it's not too late. Contact us. No, I honestly, I would like to see Commissioner Montanino drop out of the race. I don't think he should be reelected. I think he's bad for everybody at this point. And I don't know why he would put himself through the torture, to be quite honest with you. Do we want to give people, Dan, just like a little taste of what Commissioner Montanino was hearing last night, a public comment?
Yes, if I can manage that. And listen, what you're going to see is the roughest of the rough language last night.
This was the first, but while you try to pull it up, I'll kind of intro it a little bit. This was the first comment. And the public comment was made by a woman who I believe her name is Angela Kaufman, but she identifies as Diogenes. And she also, by the way, every speaker is now given 4 minutes for public comment. So they've doubled the time that people are allowed to speak. So she was the first person to public comment. And when I tell you it was scorched earth, like I've never heard a public official be burned like a public official was burned in her comment. It was pretty intense. So prepare yourself for a little profanity if Dan can pull up this video. Yeah,
and I got to say I agree with you on the Meg Kelly versus Ron Kim in that shouldn't have been allowed. I'm sort of feeling for Montanino. I mean, from a human element, that was pretty awful. Even if he made a mistake, even if it was a blunder, and I'm not saying that it was strategically, it may have been, like you said, it's giving energy to the movement where maybe it would have fizzled out. But he didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve that for any reason. As you say, Robin, for $200 a week, he definitely didn't deserve that. So let me see here if I can get this video. Okay, hang on.
Dan, there might be
Robin's usually the technical person here, so
you can do it. You can do it. We know you can do it.
I'm going around, or maybe somewhat we're getting there.
There it is, Dan.
Oh, Dan's got it. Oh, here we are.
Oops.
Oh, got it.
Okay. I pushed the wrong button. There we go. Is it on the screen? There we go.
But I'm not the only one baffled by Montanino's behavior. He's been confusing the entire career. Like when he for the Bar Association's event in 1994. Now,
is it me or can we not hear this?
Yeah.
All right, I'm pausing it.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Dan, I paused it because we couldn't really hear it. But essentially, she started off by calling him
Yeah.
the effing fascist. She brought up a few things that were true, which was he has been accused of having an issue with women. That was actually in page 6. It was one of the first things I saw about him when I Googled him way back when. He has been accused of a little misogyny. That's true. But she ripped into him in serious fashion. I would love to bring in Commissioner Benton if you are amenable, boys, to weigh in on some of what happened last night.
Sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Sure. I just to the folks, in addition to anything you had to say, Robin, did you want to briefly mention you seem to have great respect for him, as all three of us do, but you seem to know him the best. I have a little bit about his history.
I'm sorry, I did. Can you read
Commissioner Benton, you're on live with us now, and we all basically wanted to take a quick second to sing your praises as someone who has such tremendous institutional knowledge and historical knowledge of the politics in Saratoga Springs, the government in Saratoga Springs, and you have been such a tremendous source of education and help for me in terms of your perspectives on things that have happened over the last couple of years. So we're just tremendously happy and privileged to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Benton, you were a public safety commissioner for how many terms?
4.
4 terms. All right. That's a good run. Just short enough to not get the free health care, huh?
I'm sorry?
Just not 5 terms and you get the lifetime health care. So you didn't get the lifetime health care, but you look good anyway. So
I didn't I did not enroll in the healthcare system when I was a member of the city council. I was fortunate enough to have a comprehensive health plan through my other public employer.
You had a varied career and a very stellar one in public service, going back to when you were a probation officer out of college. You're a lifelong Saratoga resident, right? And your father was a police officer here. You worked for the city urban renewal agency, I believe, and 24 years on the county planning board. In addition to your 4 terms as public safety, and then for the state of New York. That's a very impressive resume. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you
for having me. Yeah.
We'd like to ask you some questions about what's been going on in city politics lately, and starting with last night, if you're okay. You saw this video, and that some of the videos or some of the speakers were critical but still level-headed. That person there was obviously not. So it went the gamut. It wasn't everybody attacking him, but they were strongly critical. They were attacking him, but maybe in a more level-headed approach. What are your thoughts on the commissioner, any politician getting attacked the way Jim Montanino was last night?
Well, it's a matter of principle. I don't go to city council meetings, and I certainly don't look at their stream. But I did see an article in this morning's Daily Gazette, which covered to a certain degree the status of the current lawsuit, not lawsuit, but rather legal action against the young lady who addressed the city council a while ago and apparently does frequently, and also the subsequent request from the Commissioner of Public Safety for an order of protection. I agree certainly that it's not appropriate or acceptable to use that platform to what ends up being destructive and shutting down a city council meeting. But all of us who have been in one of those seats has experienced, to a greater or lesser degree, a certain amount of public anger, perhaps not at this level, certainly not during my time. Robert can speak to a more contemporary period. But I suspect that the commissioner, unfortunately, opened Pandora's box. sometimes you have to listen, even though the comments are perhaps are offensive, personally offensive, may be predicated on totally incorrect information, and realize that folks using that platform are using it to address a much broader audience. They're not simply addressing members of the city council. Perhaps not even in a secondary way. To then seek through a court system an order of protection now has created an environment that it makes it all the more difficult to gain some resolution. I know it's not easy to sit there and be accused, probably falsely, of being, particularly bigoted. I mean, I know how I would not want to be so accused. But again, it's a response that sometimes, I was a chairman of the city planning board for 5 years. And in the days when we had some rather controversial land use issues before us, and frequently we had rather contentious public hearings. And I never even interrupted a speaker, but I did try on occasion to redirect the speaker to the real issue, and realizing that for many people, this is their first or experience of standing at that microphone and addressing, in this case, elected officials. And they are emotionally charged. They're vested in the issue. They, may not. You may not agree with him. I am sure that the commissioner is not a racist, but he overreacted, and now we end up in this with this cycle here, similar to the response by the commissioner and the mayor to the initial response to the shooting on Broadway back in November. So what it does, I think, too, is it transfers it moves the discussion away from the instant issue, and people begin to forget what prompted this in the first instance. So now, if you turn on the local news, televised news in the early evening, we're seeing Saratoga Springs grab a 10-second headline or a 10-second, which doesn't really report on what's going on. It simply says, there was a raucous meeting last night. They don't have the time, the ability, the energy, or the staff to really get into the background of the issue.
Or that we're just throwing activists in jail,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you agree or disagree. I mean, it's rather simplistic, but did the mayor, we know how the mayor responded to the outburst, what was it, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago, which now has led to this court involvement. And I'm sure, he was put in fairness to him, he was put in an untenable situation. Okay. Yeah. Hindsight's always 20/20. But again, sometimes you have to let someone vent even when they go beyond the established rule. The city council, I think they have a rule that does not permit them or discourages them from responding to those who comment.
Yeah.
Well, that's, in my view, that's a silly rule. Because it tends to tell the speaker that no one is listening. That, okay, we're here, we're sitting at this table, and we're looking at our watches and hoping that this will be over shortly. Mm-hmm. We don't want to. Okay. And there are opportunities sometimes to try to roll things back, and very difficult, but it can be done. But charging or filing a complaint now has muddied the water, and that becomes the story.
Yeah.
Not what precipitated the complaint or what precipitated the speaker to appear in the first instance. The story now becomes the aftermath. Commissioner X files a complaint against citizen Y, and that becomes the story. And I don't think it's good for the city as a whole.
Yeah. Can I just add?
I wished he hadn't done that. I think I read this morning that the district attorney's office is thinking of assigning or seeking a special counsel to prosecute this case. I don't know why, but this thing should be ended now. There should be a mediation. The court could order a mediation. And it might offer the opportunity for a tangible first step in trying to finally, resolve this public dispute in a way that permits both sides to engage in rational discussion designed to have a positive impact. It's difficult, and you're laboring against the background of what we have seen nationwide in the last several years. And we've lost sight of the fact that the police department should only be an extension of the community. Dan knows this. Its culture should include a good understanding of the mores of this community.
Commissioner Benton, are you interested in running for re-election this year? I said, are you interested in running for re-election this year? Because we could really use a good candidate.
I've been married for 54 years, and I like to stay married for 55. No, I ever.
Sorry to interrupt.
Very well. But well played, Commissioner.
You need to sit here and say this, but I know how difficult it is. Things have changed. Policing, unfortunately, in my opinion, police officers, unfortunately, in my opinion, have lost a great deal of discretion. And I don't think that that's good by and large. We talk about zero tolerance. We have zero tolerance for this. We have zero tolerance. I'm not so sure that's a good idea. Everybody makes mistakes. They shouldn't be career ending or, unless they, some obviously would rise to that level, but discretion.
Can I make a quick comment about the legal proceedings? So as you were talking, Commissioner, I was thinking about, I was at a council meeting in January where I went well beyond the 2-minute mark because I was heated. I was worked up about a few things. and Mayor Kim tried to get me to stop talking, and I would not stop talking. If I had
Shocking.
yeah, I know, shocking.
The neurons were firing at him in my brain. I was trying to come up with something there.
But after the fact, if I had been issued a summons for disrupting the meeting, I also am very hard-headed, and there's no way I'm pleading guilty to that, right?
No.
There's also no way I can afford an attorney right now.
No.
And so it puts you in a real predicament, and it does actually make it really intimidating to want to go back to one of those meetings to speak on something that I have every legal right to be speaking on. And I think that's maybe a perspective that I hadn't really thought about until you had come on today to discuss this.
Yeah, and there are tools, I think, and hey, I like to win arguments. I don't like to be on the losing end. I would sit at council meetings and planning board meetings and say to myself, this person does not know what they're speaking of. This person is unaware of. This person doesn't realize that. But why should that person,
Right.
they don't have the luxury of going home and poring over all the finite points of the zoning ordinance or something. Okay, all they know is that they read in the newspaper that such and such is going to happen across the street, and they're concerned about it.
Commissioner Ben, I understand the idea of sometimes you got to let people go, but that's got to be finite, right? So we essentially had, this was Commissioner Montanino made this point that our essentially city business was shut down that night. The city council meeting was stopped. Robin, I thought your idea of clearing the room was a good one, but at what point does the mayor who was tasked with running that meeting have to gain control? And what tools are they to, if not arrest or tickets or warrants? What would you if you were the mayor, what would you do in that circumstance when you reach that enough is enough point? Or is it,
as I said at the top of the discussion, that I don't go to city council meetings. I'm certainly not going to watch it on streaming. But Ron was in a difficult position. I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that ultimately he had to interrupt the meeting. He had to do something. Okay. So I don't find that to be over the top. And the meeting was, as I understand it, there were 2 or 3 attempts to reconvene the meeting to conduct some essential business until it finally was, until they finally adjourned for the evening and came back, I guess, a day or 2 later. So ultimately, that may have been the best outcome given. But, to get back to something that, Robin's point a few moments ago, where she exceeded the so-called 2-minute limit, So what's the proper response? Well, we don't play favorites, but let's be real. If I'm the mayor of the city of Saratoga Springs, God forbid, and a former member of the city council appears, and they exceed their time limit, I'm not going to tell them to sit down. I'm going to say, Commissioner, could you please wrap it up shortly? You've gone a little bit over. Could you wrap it up, please? And if that doesn't work, then fine. You have to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, your time's up. Sit down." It's not always easy, but sometimes those rules, those 2 minutes, and they have to be applied with some common sense and discretion.
Commissioner, we just had a couple.
I'm going to say, I remember we had not a city council issue. Yes, it was a city council issue. There was a vote on rezoning exit 14 in 1994, I think it was, and very volatile, and a former county Supreme Court judge, Bill Ford, got up to speak at the public hearing. Now, Bill was probably at the time in his early 80s, and he exceeded his time. And the city mayor attempted to interrupt him. And I intervened. on his behalf. And I said, well, Your Honor, I'll give Judge Ford my 2 minutes. It was simply meant to roll things back. And Bill Ford probably talked for another 15 seconds, said, thank you, Your Honor, and sat down. Something similar can be done or attempted to be done on that basis. The other thing is, I think going back and actually, even when you don't agree with what's being said, and even though it might be offensive, you can try to calm the water by responding to the speaker. And you may want to say, listen, when you're finished speaking, I would like you to come and speak with my deputy, and I'm going to ask my deputy to schedule a meeting with you at your convenience that we can sit down and talk about this.
Commissioner,
that tendency to take away some of dispel, this idea that I'm sitting here and I'm only waiting for you to sit down and shut up.
That is the wisdom that Commissioner Montagnino, despite his 67 years on earth, is lacking, because last night he did choose to respond several times, but instead of doing exactly what you're talking about, which was try to take the temperature down a little bit and let people know that he was hearing their anger, he tried to dispute what they were saying. He tried to argue the minutia. And it was just a disastrous approach.
In fairness, he was taking broadsides, and he was just getting pelted. And I think he just reacted a bit defensively. He's human. I'm not the biggest Jim Montagnino fan, but he's not a horrible human being. He's human.
I think we've all been in positions where we wanted to do that. You say, I'm not a racist.
You just zip it.
Or, I'm not this. Well, you probably aren't, but at that point in time, it's probably the worst thing you can say.
It never ends well when you start with "I'm not a racist" and then follow it up with.
Some of my best friends are,
I've been to a little Wayne concert.
Yeah.
I believe he said that.
It's So, my concern as just a plain old citizen is simply that these things drive now, and we forget and we neglect what brought it about, and the issue remains unresolved. So it festers, and it festers, and it festers. Standing up and saying, I know my police force, and my police force is not made up of any bad people. Okay. At this juncture, that's fine, but that's not going to result of it. People are going to say, oh, well, thank you for telling me that. Now that I know, I'm going to go home. It's tough. It's tough.
So if I may speak to kind of the core issue that Chandler Hickenbottom was so upset about at the time, because as you've said, it has gotten so totally obfuscated in this whole mess. The thing that BLM has been so angry about has been the lack of follow through on the 50 points that the police task force put forward and that our city council voted on and passed and said we were going to do. And what's been so frustrating to me is that when I finished out that city council term, I put together an Excel spreadsheet that had all 50 points listed out. And I had status, if there was a conflict with the charter, if funding was needed, and what the next steps were. And so we could keep track of where we were on all 50 points. And I forwarded that information to Jim Montagnino when he took over as part of the transitional information I gave him to set him up for as much success as he could possibly have in office when he took over the department. And so it's super frustrating for me that almost a year and a half later, because I sent him that information back in November of 2021. It's super frustrating for me that a year and a half later, Black Lives Matter is asking for clarity on that exact document. And clearly very little progress has been made, but also that document has been completely forgotten, not updated, because if they had followed through on what we had started, there wouldn't be this anger and there wouldn't be this confusion, because I started the process to be very clear cut and very transparent, so we wouldn't have this kind of frustration, because it's not fair all around.
Yeah.
I mean, for whatever the police department is doing, that's being lost on the public. And for whatever isn't happening, that's not fair for the folks who put in all the time to create these 50 points and the community at large. So anyhow, I understand their frustration. And I do think it's really unfortunate that it's now been completely clouded by these kind of additional, all the drama.
Did he respond to you when you presented that?
So I haven't presented that in that manner, because I didn't go to the city council meeting last night, because I didn't think my presence would be productive last night at the meeting. But I'm planning on going in 2 weeks to say exactly what I just said to you all, and to come with the document in hand to say, this is what we had, this is what I gave you, and where are they?
Yeah, Commissioner, what I was asking was, when you forwarded that spreadsheet to him, did he respond to that?
He responded saying, with I forwarded it with a whole bunch of information.
Yeah.
And so he responded affirming that he had received it. But that was it.
That was it. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't really know him. I've met him a couple of times. I've talked to him probably 3 times. And I've corresponded with him, maybe 3 times, twice by email. Shortly after he became commissioner, I read a story that he was somewhat frustrated that there were few minorities on eligible civil service list for appointment to the police service. Maybe, I don't know if he mentioned the fire service. So I said, well, obviously he has an interest in this. So I sent him some material on a minority recruitment program that I initiated in 1988, I think it was. And I said, well, this is what we were doing back in 1988, trying to bring minorities and women into the uniformed services. And, it met with some modest success. I certainly wouldn't call it, overwhelming success. But I thought, well, he would perhaps should know that at least there was an effort, what it entailed, what the outcome was. And I never got an acknowledgement that it was even received, but that's okay. I mean, and interestingly, is a footnote to that. It was a white man brought a action against me in State Division of Human Rights, alleging reverse discrimination, that he had been passed over for appointment so that I could reach a black candidate. And it was a frustrating experience, because initially the State Division of Human Rights ruled in his favor. In his favor.
Is that your lovely wife?
Yeah, and at the time, I had left office and I was working. I had a state assignment at that time, and the city mayor phoned me in my office in Albany, and he basically said, "Hey, you've been sued again, and guess what? we're not going to provide you a console because you're not on the city council any longer. So I said, okay, I'll defend myself. And it wasn't a lawsuit, it was a complaint. And I did defend myself. And ultimately, the Division of Human Rights reversed its position and sided with our effort. But I thought he would be interested. Maybe he is, maybe it was. But I just wanted him to know that there was some honest attempts to do that.
Commissioner, I actually have a real problem with that, his lack of response, because so much of what I see with incoming new city council people is that they're trying to reinvent the wheel without looking at the past and understanding that the people that came before them have done the work. And there's so much to be learned from the people who have done the work before them that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And they can learn from some of the successes or failures from the program or initiative like the one you're talking about. And so
we all want new blood. We all want people to be interested in public life. We used to, mourn the lack of candidates seeking public office. So we want new people to do that. But at the same time, the candidate, got to take the time to begin to look at, again, the culture of the community. And I think I understand full well what you're suggesting. And it is frustrating because I think we have a tendency to say, oh, well, that was a different era, which it was, and he's an old man now. So he probably wasn't interested in some of these issues way back when. And the reality is a lot was done, but it was done in a quieter way.
You got sued for reverse racism. You're basically the anti-Jim Montanino.
Well, I doubt I doubt if he's no. But that was frustrating. But anyway, I spoke to Dan earlier, and I don't want to monopolize this. One thing, if with your indulgence, I can just quickly switch gears for a minute here, and I talk about this shelter situation.
Yeah, please do.
I was invited back in November to attend a meeting in City Hall in the mayor's office between the mayor and a small group of folks from St. Peter's Parish. The pastor was there, and a trustee of the church was there. And, I don't know why I was invited, but there I was. And subsequent to the meeting, I sent Ron a memo, and I said, "Thank you for inviting me to the meeting. But having attended, I'm convinced that your resolution in October, when the City Council adopted a resolution in October, indicated it was going to enter into a lease agreement with SOS to operate a 3-tiered shelter, a code blue facility, a so-called navigation site, and a so-called low threshold full-time. I said, Ron, it was premature. It was premature. And the reason it was premature, Ron, is that you just don't enter into a lease agreement to operate this. You got to define it. You have to apply to the State Department of Social Services, which is a fairly onerous process, a very detailed application. requiring everything from how are you going to provide medical care to folks that stay there, security plan, how are you going to feed them, how are you going to provide basic hygiene services, how are you going to do this, that, and the other thing. It was never done. And to my knowledge, it still hasn't been done.
Yep.
So my point to him was, before you can decide where to put it, you need to decide what it is. And whether or not the proposed site or building can accommodate. Can it accommodate it physically? Does it meet all the fire safety requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? To my knowledge, that was never done. It still hasn't been. And I'm not even sure that people that are working on this even are fully aware of that process. So
Commissioner, it seems to me that they think that having Code Blue and operating Code Blue or operating as a no barrier shelter is just a decision the city makes, and they're unaware of all the requirements and all the legislative or not legislative, that's the incorrect, all
administrative, I believe you want to say.
New York State requirements and all the stuff you have to go through to get approvals and inspections and all the stuff that goes along with that.
Yeah. Well, you have to go to the State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance.
Right.
The applicant does ultimately, and it's a very comprehensive application. It's
not a city decision, I guess is what I'm saying.
How are you going to finance it? How are you going to staff it? How are you going to secure it?
Right.
So presumably that would provide you with some of the answers to the questions that were subsequently asked when it finally became public that this was being proposed.
Right.
And so rather than, so then they turn the tables on certain people, and I don't say this frivolously, I was a little bit offended, when I pick up a paper and I see a pastor of one church is criticizing my church because some parents had raised concerns or expressed some anger.
Right.
And saying to myself, well, because you put them in this situation.
Right.
You didn't consult with them. You didn't tell them. You didn't explain. You simply adopted a resolution that suggested that this thing was a fait accompli. It says we're going to enter into a lease with SOS, and SOS is going to do this. They're going to operate this 3-tiered facility like it was a done deal. And what frustrated me in that part was, I said, and I have said to some other people, we were criticized. I say we, that community was criticized for expressing some concerns. I said, I wonder if the critics recall where the very first Code Blue shelter was in this city.
Probably not.
In St. Peter's Elementary School. And it was established on an emergency basis, on an emergency temporary basis, because a woman what triggered it was a woman was found frozen to death.
Yeah.
On the steps of the Senior Citizen Center.
Yeah.
2013, I believe.
And the then pastor at St. Peter's intervened and said, I'll give you the auditorium at our elementary school on a temporary emergency basis.
Yeah.
And this is when the old elementary school is still being partially utilized by the high school. And it worked. It was a code blue, so these folks had to exit the building, early in the morning before the school day began.
Yeah.
Public safety would send some police officers over in the morning to make sure everything went fine.
Yep.
And, ultimately it came to an end once that crisis period was over. And I thought to myself, he being the pastor that took a lot of heat from different people. There were some parents then that were concerned, but they accepted it.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying,
10 years later.
I'm saying, if you didn't know that, fine. But before you go out on a limb and, say something that is which is going to do no one any good. Yeah. Make sure you do your homework. Make sure you know what you speak. This is not an insignificant thing.
Yeah.
So I regret that. I think that, I know that the mayor has appointed a task force, and I know one of the co-chairs is Tom Ruin, and I think that that was a very good decision, and I'm sure Tom and the other co-chair will develop. I hope and I think they will develop a program designed similar to what I have suggested in terms of, okay, what do we really want? What do we need? I assume that SOS and others in the community pretty much know the characteristics of our homeless population.
Well, Commissioner Benton, I hate to interrupt you, but we've just gone past the hour.
Oh.
And I've loved having you on so much, and I hope you will come back and join us again, because your insight and just wisdom on all of the issues facing the city, I could have you on all afternoon. But I think my co-host would kill me.
Well, I'm sorry for rambling on.
It was great. It was great insight, perspective, historical from your.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and I think that you folks are doing a great service too. I just kind of discovered this inadvertently, and Ben and I had coffee several weeks ago, and
you still agreed to come on.
It fills a void that was much needed. So thank you both. Thank you all. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much. We hope you'll join us again.
Thank
you, Commissioner. Well, boys, that was so hard to wrap, because I could have listened to Commissioner Benton all day long.
Such insight, such great perspective and wisdom.
Yeah,
I enjoy that. Hey, quick aside here. While that was happening, the Gazette did report what we've known as in play, that Tim Cole, retired FBI agent, is officially a candidate now for the Public Safety Commissioner's position. The Gazette just tweeted it out. They referred to him as an FBI agent, and I wanted to give them some time. I think that a retired FBI agent, not a current one. That would not be allowed, of course.
Real quick. I thought, but I wanted to touch on that point, because what's really interesting about Commissioner Montanino and the BLM crowd was we continue making the point that they supported them, the Democrats, throughout the election, which they did.
They did.
The interesting dynamic here is they threatened to take back that support, but where are they going to throw that support?
Will they support Tim Cole?
Will they support the law? I mean, theoretically, Tim Cole would be the more law and order candidate. I don't know that there's a lot of political leverage there, because there's what's choice B, unless like we talked about, there's a more progressive candidate that pops up, in the next couple of weeks.
Listen, I know him pretty well. I don't know if he's the more law and order candidate per se. I actually think he might be more progressive when it comes to Black Lives Matter than Jim Montanino is. based on the last 14 months of Jim's time in office. So I'm going to say this, Saratoga BLM, not that you're listening, but if someone's listening who knows Saratoga BLM, reach out to Tim Cole.
Yeah.
And reach out to us. We would love to have you on the show. This is not a very diverse group. We'd love to get some input, some understanding. BLM? What's that?
Are you talking from Saratoga BLM?
From Saratoga BLM. And I know, Robin, I think you reached out to them before too, but this is a community forum. And people talk about open-mindedness and we have our opinions, but not to say we can't be open-minded and have a critical discussion about what because I think we do see the merits and the fact of this 50-point plan is not being implemented. All right, let's talk about that. So anyway, Ron, I just wanted to touch upon if they are listening, vote for Tim Cole, I guess is what Robin's saying. Dan and I aren't saying that, but we're not saying that either. But what we are saying is we would love to have you on and talk about, some of your concerns with the city and the city council and the way they're handling the police reform.
My quick view, if I could just jump in on Tim Cole, I think he's very reasonable, politically savvy. I wouldn't say because he's law and order, and to a degree he will be, that he won't be understanding on these issues. He may surprise you.
If he was really politically savvy, he'd be challenging Jim Montanino in a Democratic primary, Tim Cole. Tisk, 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 tisk. But that being said, if anyone from Saratoga BLM did want to come on and they were uncomfortable with me as a co-host, I'd be happy to step out for that segment. Just throwing that out there because I could understand why that might be the case. So just saying that. But you guys,
what Tim should do? Tim should, to the debate, he should wear the Jim Montanino red T-shirt. That'd be a power flex move. Just show up in that T-shirt. Just give us, if nothing else, give us something to talk about.
I would wet my pants, and I completely agree. You guys, I also sipped what was probably a month-old thing of Diet Coke in the middle of that interview with Commissioner Benton. I don't know if you guys saw me grimace, but if you did, that was why. This is literally a month old. It was fucking disgusting.
As long as there's no dip in it, you're good.
Yeah, there was so much that I also want to discuss from last night's council meeting, specifically the crisis we are facing in Saratoga Springs. You guys, do you know what the crisis is?
Oh, the porta potties.
You guys, Code Blue is about to close, and the homeless have nowhere to shit and pee. And this is a capital C crisis for Jim Montanino, who apparently wasn't here last year when Code Blue closed and there was no porta potties, the year before, and so on and so forth. So he is freaking out, level 10 freaking out that there's no bathroom facilities for the homeless after Code Blue closes. And he thinks that the answer to that is putting in 2 porta potties at the Woodlawn Garage. That is the answer to this problem. Completely somehow forgetting that the vagrancy issue at the Woodlawn Garage has become everybody's problem. And putting 2 porta potties there doesn't do anything but encourage people to be vagrants there because you've just given them a bathroom. And he thinks, no, that's not going to be an issue because now we have high-resolution cameras that are going to monitor those 2 porta potties 24/7. At which point, Commissioner Songvi said, you mean we're going to have a potty police?
I heard that too. That was I couldn't tell. She said it. I couldn't tell if she was joking. Like, I think she said it not joking, but then realized how ridiculous that sounded of asking we're going to have the potty police. But this is the crisis, what we've come down to.
And that was the thing that got Montanino and Mayor Kim just about punching each other. That was the issue. And they went off on tangents and, well, you haven't appointed anybody to the homeless task force and you caved on this. Holy cow. I didn't see that one coming.
It was crazy. I don't want to say who texted this to me, but I did get a text at one point that said potty police was not on my city council bingo card. And I started wetting my pants, also laughing. No, they went crazy. And Ron Kim was like, well, who'd you appoint to the homeless task force? And Jim Montanino was like, it's my 4th agenda item tonight. Blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? We got to the 4th agenda item and Jim Montanino starts talking. He's not appointing anyone to that task force. He was like, fuck you, task force. I'm not appointing anybody. Right. So the whole thing was completely bananas. Also, Dylan Moran was on Zoom. And this is not Dylan's fault at all, but Dylan was on Zoom. So he was on a screen that was like this fucking big. Sorry. this effing dig behind everybody. So he was like the overlord.
Yeah.
And like, it was just the visual was like kind of bananas.
Especially in the room, Robin. Yeah, especially in the room. It was, and then his voice was distorted. The video was distorted. It was a little freaky.
He might as well have been the white cat.
Yeah, he looked like the big evil guy on the screen, just looking down upon people. It was, it just was one of those. It was one of those nobody's fault, but just the humors of city council. And on that note, I real quick wanted to give my solution, and I was actually thinking about doing this. You know what they really need? They have a microphone system in their PA system. They need playoff music. They just need to start. So when people were talking, I was actually thinking about hiding a speaker. Yeah, hiding a speaker in the auditorium and just slowly raising the volume and just playing playoff music. I think that would solve a lot of
the.
Yeah, exactly.
That would go over well. Hey, we got a couple comments here, guys. We got a couple comments on our screen.
Oh, we do.
My first podcast, Jim Cullen. My first podcast viewing. I wish all towns would do this type of thing to work out problems.
We love you, Jim.
Saratoga, thank you for commenting. I was in Saratoga 87, 88 and trying to get back again permanently, so I try to keep up with the news there. Aww. And I visit every year. Dan, you're clearly the best on this program. How do you deal with the other two?
But Robin is the prettiest.
And F you, Adam Israel. Get out of the show. Story of my life. But
we're making it up. You guys, should we go into? By the way, the playoff music is brilliant. I'm just giggling now. Should we go into our cheers and jeers and wrap up? I think we've been on for a solid hour 6.
Yeah.
I've got one thing that's going to qualify as a cheer. I don't know much.
Whoops.
Folks, I guess it could be a multiple cheer. Commissioner Sungvi, as you recall, implemented participatory budgeting. There were a number of things. In fact, that was mentioned last night in a derogatory way about the dog faucet or the dog drinking fountain. Not a derogatory, but a harsh. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. One of those was curling here in the Spa City. It was my proposal. I'm near and dear to it. I went last week. I should have had the video ready, but there's only 2 more curling left. 8 p.m. at the Vernon Rink on Weibel Avenue, the city rinks on Weibel Avenue. We're having fun there. It's free. You don't need equipment. Awesome. You don't need ability. And it was fun. And all you need is warm clothes and rubber-soled shoes. That's the only equipment you need. It's challenging, but it's not physically demanding. Anybody that can shuffleboard can curl.
Free, no ability, and not physically demanding.
Yeah, I went and I had a blast.
That's right. You were there the first
I curled
week.
An ace. I have it on video. So one time we'll send my video. My wife got it. Just nailing that.
Next week. I forgot you were there. Where were you last week?
The Caribbean.
Why wasn't I invited? What the heck?
It's all over. Come on. I'm blasting it on What's Going On Saratoga, which incidentally is up to 33,000 members almost.
All right, Dalton. Friday.
All right, cheers and cheers.
We're gonna have a Saratoga podcast curl off. But all right, cheers and cheers.
Oh yeah, Saratoga podcast curl off. I'm in.
All right, so that was Dan's cheer. Dan, you got a cheer?
No.
Oh. No. Israel, you got something?
All right, I got two cheers and a jeer. My first cheer is kind of a serious one. I on the political spectrum, as we've talked about, the conservative. I go to these meetings having trouble relating to what a lot of the BLM, where their issues are and how they're addressing their issues. There was a Skidmore professor. His name is Winston Grady Willis. He's a professor and director over at Skidmore of Black Studies, I believe. And he was very articulate and well-spoken about some of the techniques and the way that the BLM protesters express themselves. Not that I agree with it, but I think it is important for people to have open minds, and you hear that a lot about try to see it from a different viewpoint. I thought he did a great job of expressing it from a different viewpoint. One of these things where maybe one time if he would come on the show, that would be great, because again, we tend to skew the same political reason, and we're almost thirsting for for dissent, for somebody, disagreeing and showing us the different ways. So anyway, Professor Grady Willis, I thought you made some very good points, and I think you had an effect on the way myself and maybe some other people looked at the current situation. And I'll go into my jeer right now is for Fox News. I like to talk about national things every now and again. It's this I want to say Old Dominion. It's not Old Dominion. The Dominion voting system. These text messages are coming out with the Fox News hosts showing that organization knew that these election fraud claims were garbage, and it was not. It's propaganda. It's not about reporting. It's not about telling a story and giving people the truth. It's about telling people what they want to hear. I think MSNBC is equally as guilty. They just is not to the extent of they have a Donald Trump-like character that they're supporting. So my jeer is for Fox News. My cheer, and this is going to be an interesting one, is for Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson finally spoke truth, something he has never done before. And in his text messages, he was talking about Donald Trump. He said, we were very close to being able to ignore Trump. He said, I want nothing more. It does feel very close. I hate him passionately. I can't handle any more of this. So Tucker Carlson finally talking about how everybody really feels about Donald Trump. And for my conservative friends who are listening, you may or may not consider me conservative, but I think it's important that, when people get stuck in their echo chambers, Fox News does not report on any of this. That Fox News is reporting what you want to hear, not the truth. Again, I understand, and I think this is important for everybody to understand, both sides do it. It's not just the Fox that's doing it, but Fox got caught with their hand in the cookie jar with these text messages that I assume came out via subpoena. These text messages are showing that, in fact, this is propaganda. This is not news. So this is and again, going back to Tucker Carlson, obviously that was a joke, cheering him. What he did with the January 6th and Kevin McCarthy, they selectively took video footage, only gave it to Fox News, and tried to whitewash what happened on January 6th. It's just it's doing our service, our country, a huge disservice on the sake of money and greed, and it's really despicable. So that's my cheer and jeer.
Okay, Adam, you really took me on an emotional roller coaster there, and I wasn't sure where we were going to go. Yeah. And I got a little nervous. Yeah. But my cheer is now officially for Adam Israel.
Woo!
Adam, I loved your cheer and I loved your jeer. That rocked.
Thank you.
That rocked all around. Seriously, those were both awesome. My only asterisk that I'm putting on your one statement is that I do think MSNBC leans in a totally other direction, but I don't think the way that they spin things is dangerous in the way that Fox News spins things. So anyway.
Well, right now, and again, the sooner the Republicans move past Trump, the sooner this party can start to be meaningful again, and attract the moderate, the middle, the rational.
And more importantly, it's not so much the Republicans; it's more importantly the media outlets, Fox News has got. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah, and that transcends media. Yeah. I mean, if you look at our local media, we have my problems with the Times Union. I believe that they tell the story they want to tell. They don't report the news. I think the Daily Gazette, and there's this reporter from the Daily Gazette. She's doing a fantastic job.
Shenandoah Breer.
She is.
I don't know where she came from, but she's live tweeting from the event. She's stating fact. I think she's doing a really great job, and I think we're really fortunate to have the Daily Gazette and her report.
They better pay her well, because these young reporters move on if they're not taken care of.
I totally agree, and I will say also, there was one little thing that was incorrect in one of her articles the other day, and I DM'd her about it, and she fixed it right away, which was actually a shocking first for me in media here. And that is not to say there's been any inaccuracy in her articles at all. I just noticed this one little thing. It was more about her responsiveness, and I just really appreciated it. And I also think she's just done a tremendous job with the local coverage too. And I can guarantee you they're paying her nothing. And so it's you almost want to have a GoFundMe page for these great local journalists, because
we'll start our own GoFundMe first here. Come on, Dawn.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We need to make a little change here.
Well, I know we've gone really long. I had one very quick I had one very quick cheer, and that was for Dan's wife, Margarita, because she is a freaking hero and basically saved this person on a plane. And Dan, I'll let you tell the brief story, but She's a doctor. We did not know that. And we just wanted to give her a shout out because she rocks.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you. We were flying back from Florida, and the call went out over the PA system as anybody, a doctor or a nurse or a medical practitioner on the plane, and then you could see 3 flight attendants, on one seat. Something was clearly going on. My wife missed the call. Fortunately, I caught it, and I basically jabbed her, and she's like, "What? Huh? What?" And there was a gentleman from Saratoga County who was having a medical emergency. I won't go into details. But my wife was able to stabilize him until we landed, and it was scary, but at the same time thrilling for me to see my wife in action. Working on someone that was in serious distress, and so thanks for mentioning that. She's a great doctor. She's got a great following, and
Adam and I want to know if she writes prescriptions. No, I'm kidding.
I'm arranging her birthday party for a year that ends in a 0. That's as much as I can say. Coming up.
I'm assuming it's 30.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yeah,
and happy. It's a great story. And Robin, you too. Happy International Women's Day too. On that note, women do great things around this.
As an Armenian woman, I thank you.
Wait! I've got one last thing to add.
Yes.
Jim Cullen, one more. This is the first ever here. A cheer from a viewer. My cheer is a throwback since this is my first visit, Saratoga City Hall. I was married there by Judge LaBelle back in February of 1988. That's 35 years. Congratulations, Jim Cullen. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Also, you guys, next week, we have a huge cover reveal that's going to be at the top of our show next week for Saratoga Living. Adam doesn't know what it is, but he's going to freaking love it. So everybody tune in next Wednesday at noon. We'll see you then. You guys, this was a great episode. It's so good being reunited. Missed you all.
Right.
Thanks for watching, folks.
Stay charming, Saratoga.